So that is going to bring us to hear from Halil. So we would love to hear your comments. Dan, now you are based in Africa, in Nigeria.
Well, with regards to the lessons, I'll start with the lessons with this pandemic. Not only Africa, Europe, but the whole world will come to realize that we need each other in terms of collaboration, one. And secondly, we also need to build local industries because it came as a surprise and it came very fast and quick. There are some countries that are over-relying on other countries, be it for raw materials or for finished products. It could be both way, Africa, Europe, or Europe, Africa. It also calls for development of local industries because we have seen certain things that have seized off completely. Also, it brings up an issue for learning. Like Eloise earlier said, Africa has been handling well, but we really haven't narrowed down to the reason why it has happened this way. Is it because of experience with other pandemics? It could be also herd immunity, you know. Another thing is, I was just seeing what Nigeria did, has been just opening up slowly. Because if you look at it, a country with like 200 million people, seeing what is happening in Italy, which has one of the best healthcares in the world, why should you even fight something that you don't have the resources to fight it, you know? You might as well just open up the economy, at least instead of losing the two ends, you know, just lose one and put up precautionary measures, you know. So maybe one of the things we might learn from the African environment is just taking a hard hit on something, facing it, you know, face to face, and not trying to hide from trying to, you know, put on certain measures that might not be very sustainable. Because if the likes of this is happening in Italy, you know, you can only imagine what's going to happen in Africa. But generally, what this has shown us is we need to strengthen systems. There is no country that is going to work in isolation. And also, there is a need for infrastructure. You know, if you take, for example, logistics, which is the area where I know the most, no matter how much you've got in automation or in advancement, products and services has to be delivered one way or the other, you know, whether it's raw material or it's finished products. And if Europe doesn't help Africa in developing its own infrastructure, then they wouldn't also get the service delivery you need, you know, and vice versa. So in a nutshell, a lot has to do with collaboration. And I see that there will begin to more and more and more collaborations post-pandemic. Ever since the pandemic started, you see even terrorist groups are taking a break, you know? You hear that Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda, they're also taking a break because of pandemic, you know? So it's really interesting, and also at the same time that, you know, whenever there's a crisis, everybody forgets where we came from, different colors, different language, you know, and come and face it hard on, you know. So a lot of, for example, in Nigeria, there are bandits, there are robberies, and there are so many things, but everybody, you know, now is running to safety and saying, okay, I'm going to operate, or I'm going to suspend my activities, you know, until then. And so the word for my days is collaboration, post-pandemic. We're going to see so much of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Halil. So now we'd love to hear from Julio. Open your microphone. No.
I've been doing Zooms all day. I don't know what kind.
Now we could hear you. We could hear you perfectly.
Thank you very much. Thanks again. It's an honor and a pleasure. Well, I totally agree with the previous speakers. The pandemic is probably the most consequential event that we ever seen or lived. Still terra incognita, we don't know what the long-term social and economic implications. I want to believe that this pandemic will become landmark, a milestone in many aspects. And this will happen because the system has shown how vulnerable it is, as never had shown. I mean, never we had this awareness of vulnerability, and this is good. I mean, without perception of crisis, sensation of risk, there is no change. It's a basic principle of psychology. And that's why I believe that the relative perception of crisis, systemic crisis, is far more important and maybe meaningful that right now than the pandemic itself. I'm talking about perception, recognition that the system is not working well. This per se is good, very good at this stage, period. I know that taking into account the number of people that have died, it may sound a bit strange, but well, the people that will continue dying and suffering because of the problems that as a system, with our system we have, is also very important. I mean, actually, most of my colleagues, friends, regardless their urgencies and problems they have, most of them are business people, and they are suffering the consequences of the pandemic, some of them very dramatically. But most of them are very, very optimistic right now. And they are because they sense that the present situation is a unique opportunity for us, for a breakthrough in governance, in societal terms. And well, that's as a starting point, that's my starting point. I mean, to analyze this pandemic, this situation, this crisis. Opportunity, optimism, and we'll see. Of course, later on I will talk on collaboration as other already did. I think there are options to explore in the collaboration, Africa, Europe, in the way we collaborate that, of course, have to improve, and it's an opportunity to do so.
Thank you all. And the next question is, most of Eurocentric press and media foresaw an enhanced pandemic scenario for Africa, based on the old idea that Africa means chaos and mismanagement, but it didn't happen. Why? What can tell Africa to Europe about managing the crisis? We heard, I mean, let's have a little bit of reflection here. And I would just start by Khalil to elaborate a little bit more about that. Give us more details about why do you think that the media has foreseen a different scenario, and what is the surprise that we all came up with?
Okay. Are you talking about the African media or the general media?
I think the global media, because one of the things that they said when the pandemic was starting is the concern that Africa has not the tools and the possibilities to take care of, and the health system was a deficit in the health system. So it's been a surprise that Africa has coped with this pandemic in a way that media did not expect it. So what is your view?
Well, number one, I'm not surprised, because if you've seen Africa in the movies, and then if you travel to Africa, then you see the difference, you know. And you know, you will have thought, okay, you just land and see lions and you know, and in the jungle. So really, to begin with, the media has never been has never justified Africa for what it is. One, and also it calls for a lot of data and analytics on Africa itself. You know, today, if you are doing a research, one of the most difficult things is to find data and information about Africa. We have seen what Madagascar has done with the, you know, COVID, you know, drug, showing very good success rates, you know, and even there's some places, you know, in West Africa that have shown significant. You see what Senegal has done with the testing kits, bringing it at an affordable price. So it goes a long way to say there are so much that is coming out of Africa, but doesn't have a proper coverage. It could be that the media has not been exposed to those kind of data to be able to represent Africa fully well. One, or secondly, Africa is not doing enough to showcase what we have in, you know, to the world. And I think this is a perfect opportunity for Africa to show, okay, this is what we have and this is what we offer, so that we can be taken more serious, with regards to global issues. It's not always come and give support to Africa, but also come and take something away from Africa and lessen, lands. Where I come from, post pre-colonization, there was a proper structure, for taxation, for if you do something, how you are punishable, even before the British install their own system of rule and governance, So there's so much that needs to be learned from Africa with regards to traditional medicine. There might be one or two standardization, but I think this shows that a lot needs to be done in terms of data collection, in terms of media representation of Africa, and in terms of how it also present a stage for Africa to clearly show the world what we can do and what the world can learn from us differently.
Thank you, Khalil. Her Excellency, what is your comments on that?
Well, very briefly, I would like just to probably go through the list that nobody gave, about why the reasons. Many, many reasons have been said. That first of all, Africa is more isolated and that less communication with the rest of the world. As it came from China, it was directly transmitted to Europe through Fashion Week in Milano to Italy first. Second, that probably it's warmer in Africa and that the virus will shun from warm regions. Second, young population, 60% less than 25-year-old, and this would be a very great asset as well. And of course, it has been, as well said, the experience of previous epidemic, and especially the Ebola one, which was very serious in 2015, Africa has some kind of experience to face the epidemics and probably the anticipation, strong anticipation by the national states and even by the AU. Just a few words about the African Union, which is, we are used, to Africa bashing. And we spend our lives, defending Africa and trying to clarify biased views and biased perceptions about Africa. But African Union has that it is bureaucratic, that it is too slow, that it doesn't function. However, I would like just to underline two facts. First of all, it had anticipated already by reinforcing the Center for Disease Control, which had been created in 2015, and it has been re-enhanced in 2019 with close cooperation with the WHO in order to be ready for any kind of epidemic. Second, very quickly, the African Union has appointed the best scientists from Africa, even living abroad, in all fields to try to give the sanitary answer, because we know the fragility of the health systems across the continent. 7 beds of reanimation in Burkina Faso, in the biggest, hospital, we do know that, and 1 doctor for 10,000 people. We know the fragility of the systems. But they have as well appointed 5 special envoys to coordinate the global answer to recession and to coordinate the international support with very solid background, like everybody knows Tidjane Thiam, of course, who was the former president of Credit Suisse, or Ngozi, the former finance minister of Nigeria. And all these people have given some kind, of, and they are really activating. But of course, we still have to put question marks. Where are the results on the spot? We have not seen yet this multilateral activity. It's not yet on the ground. We don't see it yet, but it's there, and they are working to try to anticipate. And another thing to compare with Europe, Africa needs 100 billion to face the corollary of the pandemic, which is the recession and the sanitary consequences. And it has only been offered, between brackets, 44 billion by all the funders. So they still need fresh money, and especially that we are seeing now a potential food crisis, extremely severe, coming, and we have no what we call helicopter money to give to people and to help them to survive. So I think we should really refrain from giving lessons. Africa, for sure, has very strong assets, precisely in its culture, in local wisdom, in the capacity of solidarity, and as well of the creativity of the populations in front of hardship, because we are used to hardship and we know how to respond to it. And we have probably more flexibility than the Scandinavian, who are formatted to have processes and to respect protocols and to respect laws and so forth. So there is certainly this extraordinary capacity. And let's see, resilience. Resilience is absolutely basic. This is the good lesson. But for me, one lesson that we really should learn is what type of education are we going to the young Africans to face potential risks and to adapt to situations where you teach the human being to be and not only skills and to know. This is absolutely basic, because at the end of the day, what we need is a total reappraisal of our ways of life, the styles of life, how we produce, how we circulate, how we distribute, how we see each other. So a total reappraisal of the styles of life for two reasons: not only to meet the constraints and the consequences imposed by the virus COVID-19, but to anticipate and prepare for the future shocks. I'm much more keen on that. And the future shock, but I prefer to talk about it later, is probably the terrible conjunction of climate change, of environment deterioration, resources depletion, and for which Africa the whole of the world is vulnerable, but Africa is much more vulnerable to this future, unfortunately predictable shock. So we have really to prepare for that. And this would be probably the best lesson, that because the other is becoming the threat, but the other is as well the resource, because I cannot exist without you, without us. So this is the big, how do we cooperate on the local level and on the global governance to bring collective answers to these common perils?
Thank you so much, Her Excellency. Thank you. Now, Julio, what is your comments on that? Microphone? No. Yeah, you have to, yes.
Okay. I was saying that I'm not an expert on medicine, on health, or on Africa either. I'm on innovation. But this piece of information is very good news. I mean, it will reduce Europe and US self-importance, self-perception, and Africa's perception. And that is very good in itself. I really feel happy. I mean, the map of the pandemics show that Africa has suffered far less, absolutely, than other countries. So, well, I hope that there will be resources to analyze this, to extract lessons from that. We'll see. I mean, heat, less mobility, isolation, young population, they have been mentioned, but also timeliness of the decisions, of the measures, and the drastic nature of the decision. So, well, there are factors that talk about the capacity of Africa for good governance, and well, this, apart from the experience Africa has on pandemics, far more than Europe, is a good thing. I mean, it's something we should learn. Scholars of collective action call, something I appreciate, I really love, use the concept of weakest link. weakest link problem, okay? Where states are only as safe as the weakest link in the network. And it's sad because Africa was supposed to be the weakest link. It has not, okay, wonderful. But it remains to be seen and researched to which an extent the Europe, US, well, already other speakers talk on that, have been instrumental or helpful on that, on the fact that Africa is suffering far less than any other continent. I'm afraid that Europe, at least, was not instrumental or helpful to prevent the coronavirus transmission. I'm trying to be very brief, 3 minutes. I mean, just the key messages. I hope to know more about this. I knew about like in India, a place I was 3 months ago, and it was surprising. I mean, no incidence of coronavirus in India, in Africa, the way it is happening in other places. I think that beyond heat, beyond population, the structure of population, there are other factors, and well, that's a lesson we need here in Europe, at least, for sure. Happy about that.